webinar titled The Future of Mortgage Lending, Effective and Compliant Sales Presentations That Will Turn Prospects into Loving Clients, sponsored and presented by Mortgage Success Source. I would like to thank all of our webinar attendees for taking the time out of their busy days for this very valuable and informative webinar in our ongoing series of webinars. I would especially like to thank today's webinar sponsors and presenters, Mortgage Success Source and Maximum Acceleration. Mortgage Success Source brings together the power of the Mortgage Market Guide and Loan Toolbox as a central resource for mortgage originators to find all the tools they need to be successful in today's market. They are committed to providing you with strategies, information, and practical resources that help you work smarter, increase your loan volume, and generate leads. Maximum Acceleration is a professional coaching company built around the model known as the Business Planning Tool, which is organized by the Pyramid of Success. This model contains over 56 individual goals and over 3,000 action items that allow them to build a custom development plan for each of their clients, allowing their coaches and clients to focus on tactical skills, development, and refinement that will yield dramatic results. We are lucky enough to have two presenters for today's webinar. Todd Ballinger serves as President of Sales Solutions at Mortgage Success Source. He has 23 years experience in the financial services industry as a licensed securities, insurance, real estate, and mortgage lending professional. Todd is considered an industry pioneer in the area of capital market and credit market convergence and has published courses on lending and equity management currently approved for realtors, appraisers, builders, and lenders in over 42 states. Todd is a two-time Inc. 500 winner, a three-time KPMG Fast 50 winner, and the 1998 North Carolina Mortgage Lender of the Year. Todd was awarded the 2003 40 Under 40 Award by the Triangle Business Journal in North Carolina as one of the top 40 young leaders. Todd has a business degree from the University of North Carolina. He is the author of Borrow Smart, Retire Rich. Eric Janesco has served the financial services industry for over 10 years. And this time, Eric has succeeded in origination, management, wholesale, training, and coaching roles. As an originator, Eric closed a career of 436 loans in 4.5 years and over 2,600 wholesale originations in 3.5 years through the sales techniques he now shares with clients. In January 2006, Eric shifted his focus full-time to his true passion of helping people achieve massive success. His workshops and presentations are based on hands-on research in the areas of proven sales systems and performance acceleration strategies for both individuals and organizations. Eric shares only truly proven strategies that have been refined in the laboratory environment of coaching several of our industry's top performers. As a featured speaker at leading industry events, including Business Plan 2007 and 2008, he has had the great honor of helping to create incredible success for all attendees. Eric's #1 passion is for helping all clients live a better life and achieve performance levels beyond their wildest imagination. Before I turn the webinar over to these presenters, I would like to conduct a brief poll with these 3 survey questions. Please respond by clicking your choice on the screen, and I will report the results of each poll as it's closed. So I'm going to put that first poll question up right now. And that first question is, have compliance changes impacted your marketing? I'll give you a few seconds to answer that. Okay, and I'm going to close that poll. All right, so clearly it has impacted 85% of the attendees' marketing, so they are in the right place for this webinar. Okay, and we're going to do the next question, which is, have you changed the way you present to your clients due to these compliance changes? All right, it seems that 85% and 15% is a common split for these polls. The same results for this one as well. Okay, one more question before we get started. Do you have fewer competitors now than you did 3 years ago? Okay, and we're going to close this poll as well. That one slightly different. 77% said yes, and 23% said no. Okay, thank you for participating in these polls, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to today's webinar presenters for the Future of Mortgage Lending, Effective and Compliant Sales Presentations that will turn prospects into loving clients, Todd Ballinger and Eric Janesco.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. When we launched our Maximum Performance webinar series a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to Todd Ballinger and asked him to be one of our lead speakers on this program because the area that Todd speaks in and talks about is an area that I personally am very passionate about. Having been a student of the industry since 1996, when I got in the business, I always worked to try and create a better layer of advice and guidance and more value for a customer. Because at the end of the day, the mortgage is one of the most powerful financial decisions and important financial decisions that American families make. I mean, for most families, it's not only the single biggest line item of their budget and will be for the majority of their working years, it is also what controls what for most families is their largest asset, which is their home. So one of the things we constantly work to coach our clients on is how to be more valuable to clients and in some cases be more deliberate and in some cases belligerent about educating them on how important of a financial choice that is. I mean, like for example, one of the very first positioning conversations that we introduce our clients to, our coaching clients, that they should be having with their borrowers within the first couple of minutes of making contact and starting to discuss the idea of potential new mortgage is that we really, as a group, as an originator, we need to talk to our clients about stepping back and taking a look at the bigger, longer-term picture and how the choices that are made in the creation of a mortgage have a huge impact on a borrower's ability to achieve not only their goals for that home, but also their goals for anything else they might want to accomplish financially. I mean, think about it just from this perspective. I mean, how many times over your career have you seen walk in and demand the 20% down and completely ignore tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt? I mean, I don't care if you even are at a marginal qualifying ability and you're looking at an FHA loan with a mortgage insurance premium at 90% because that's the best you can get. You're still a lot cheaper than 19% credit card debt. I mean, by the time you add up total cost of interest rate and insurance and mortgage insurance premiums, you're at a quarter of what most credit cards charge. And yet people make that silly decision all the time. So one of the things I was really excited to be able to bring to you guys is to introduce Todd and bring him along for this topic, especially because of Todd's knowledge and experience on both the financial planning and fiscally responsible side of mortgage advisory. And by the way, just so you know, guys, mortgage planning got a bad rap over the last couple of years. I'm not talking about the style of mortgage planning that became popular in the early 2000s, which was the, throw everybody into a pay option arm and rape and pillage their equity to buy high-risk securities. That's not what I'm talking about. What we're talking about here is taking the time to take into consideration how income, cash flow, and all of the other stuff that Todd's going to talk to you about today impact the decisions that people make when they're making this most important decision of their lives. And that's one of the reasons that I was very excited when Todd agreed to join me for today's program, because I really do believe that he's one of the leaders in the industry, and especially with his wide breadth of knowledge across both the financial planning and the mortgage lending sides of the industry, he brings a unique perspective to that whole idea and concept. I'm going to kind of skip over the ideas and bios. You guys, Beverly, did a great job introducing us. At this point, I'd love to go ahead and just invite Todd on the call. I'm going to get Todd up here and get him running with the program, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A towards the end. But Todd, if you're ready to take off, I'm ready to hand the keys over to you and let you drive for a little while. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great. Great. Thanks again for having me on the call today, Eric. We're excited as a company. Mortgage Success Source is committed to making good loan officers great and great loan officers unbeatable. So we're going to focus on our call today in two different ways. I mean, I could jump right into the skill set and what it really means to be an effective mortgage planner. As Eric mentioned, having started my career as a financial advisor and transitioning from financial advice to mortgage lending, I realized that the industries were not that different. And I felt like in time they would actually come together in a very meaningful way to where the role of the loan officer is not really that different from a financial advisor's role. The big difference is which side of the balance sheet you're choosing to focus on. Financial advisor is going to focus on the asset side of the balance sheet. The lender is going to focus more on what we would call the liability side of the balance sheet. And so what we're going to do is we're going to focus first on mindset and then skill set. And mindset to me is it's kind of that meat tenderizer to get your head thinking a little differently about what your role is really becoming today because of some of the things that have happened and how it might change over the next couple of years. Because I think if you can have a feel for that, you're going to be able to adapt more readily and be much more effective in how you're perceived in time. Some of the people that we've worked with over the last couple of years on some of these same things we're going to talk about today have actually seen an explosion in their personal production because they're now working with CPAs and financial advisors. We did an interview last week where a loan officer was getting 75% of his business now from financial advisors, and that's because they're starting to learn how to think about what they do differently, and that really resonates with other financial professionals. So realtors are obviously going to be a big part of your business going forward, but so will financial advisors and CPAs. And if you think the first person that someone calls is a realtor when they're going to buy the house, think again. You're going to talk to your financial advisor about that first. In many cases, they would get the first call. The realtor would get a call after they've decided where that down payment's coming from and what they're going to be doing. So as we go through this today, I want to give you a formula for consideration, and I hope you'll be an active listener. And what I mean by active listener is take some notes, get a piece of paper out if you haven't already and a pen, and start jotting down some notes. There's going to be a recording available of this after our call today. But hopefully if you take some notes, some certain things may really stand out for you. So we're going to be talking about things that hopefully impact your beliefs today. We're going to talk about some things that may even impact your attitudes about what you do in your business. And we're going to talk about skill sets, things that can actually have an impact on your behavior, how you interact with clients and prospects and referral partners. And there's only really one reason to do that, and that is we're ultimately focused on your results. We can help you be more effective in what it is that you're doing, whether that's increasing your conversion rates or generating new business opportunities. We find that ultimately your results are a function of your beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. If you don't like your results today, you need to first look at your behavior. What are my behaviors? How am I behaving? Secondly, my attitudes about the business. If I really hate compliance or I really don't like a certain thing, that's going to impact my business and ultimately at some level my beliefs. What is it that I'm really doing? Am I selling products or am I solving problems? That's a belief that in some of the loan officers that we worked with in transitioning their business to be more of what we think of as, I don't use mortgage planning, I use liability advisor, because I think it better separates you mentally into their financial advisors and their liability advisors, and that's what I do. And that could be a realm of mortgages and, as Eric mentioned, credit card debt and other things, but ultimately think of yourself as a liability advisor. And in shifting from selling products to solving problems, you're going to be in alignment with the compliance, the CFPB, the SAFE Act, and a lot of these things that are coming down the pipe today. When we look at compliance as a definition, because that's something we have to consider, I looked up the definition, and it's frightening. You know, when you first see it, compliance is the act of conforming or yielding, a tendency to yield readily to others in a weak or subservient way, conformity in compliance with orders, cooperation, or obedience. What person on this call would like to be someone that has to yield to others or be weak in a subservient way? The very nature of compliance, unfortunately, has a very, very negative connotation to it, yet it is becoming a very, very real part of our world. When I talk to people about the future of the lending industry, it's not that I have this crystal ball. It's just I watch the financial planning industry go through the exact same process over about the last 10 to 12 years. The lending industry is going through the process that the financial planning industry went through, so it's actually very predictable what would happen, that loan officers would have, instead of a U4, they would have their own NMLS number, that FINRA, the body that regulates financial advisors, would regulate the mortgage lending industry as they do now, that the SEC would be involved, not only the state and other regulatory bodies. The same things that have happened in the financial planning industry are happening in the lending industry. And while it may be somewhat painful, I'm going to share with you some thoughts on why this will actually be good for you. And you've already reflected that in the polls, that you're starting to change your behavior, but it's also, for most of you, 75% said you have fewer competitors, and that's exactly what happened in the financial planning industry. My definition of compliance is, at the end of the day, it protects the corporation. Corporation or corporal means body of people. There's no corporation. Corporations don't exist. It's just a group of people that have come together. And what you're trying to do is protect yourself from that one cell in the body, that one person that could literally put the entire body at risk. Because if you are a productive contributor at a company and you are relying on that relationship between your productivity and that company's ability to fund loans and stuff, you want compliance, because compliance is actually about making sure that the dumbest, least experienced person in your organization doesn't do something that could literally put that corporation into a situation where it can no longer support you and you can no longer support it. So we have to, in some ways, embrace compliance. And we look at compliance and we look at the major compliance shift that have happened historically. Most of them has come as part of a bubble of some kind, because most of the time we don't get change voluntarily. Change comes as a knee-jerk reaction to something, a crisis. There have been over 180 of these bubbles in the past, and a bubble is very predictable. It begins with a mania, it ends in a panic, and then it resolves ultimately in some form of crash. And then it starts over again. And there have been hundreds of these things over time. What makes them noticeable and what makes them sort of leave a mark is the degree to which there was leverage. There's a wonderful book called Manias, Panics, and Crashes, and it's all about these things. And what they found was a mania is a fear of missing out that causes a great number of people to take an action they might not have taken otherwise if they weren't afraid. And because that happens, people get into a situation where they suddenly realize maybe they did something they shouldn't have done, and they panic and try to get out. And when they can't all get out at the same time, we end up with a crash. So if you think about that, and the idea that the degree to which the bubble is a small bubble or a large bubble is the degree to which leverage was employed. And this is all the way back from the tulips and the South Sea bubble to the most recent financial crisis, the dot-com crisis. Each of those, there was a mania, a fear of missing out on the stock market in the dot-com, and people borrowed money to invest, and literally there was a panic, and we saw a stock market crash. If you can't find this particular dynamic on this chart, I've got it outlined for you, and that being obviously the house price bubble and the experience we went through there, which was fueled by leverage, making it one of the largest financial bubbles in history, because people started to fear that they were missing out, and that drove prices up almost 100% over a few years there, only to yield in a panic to get out and deleveraging. And now we see ourselves finding that other side of the triangle as we've crashed, and now the market starts to repair itself. So why is that important to understand? It's important to understand because when this type of thing happens, great changes take place in an industry very quickly. And that's what we've seen happen in the last couple of years. And the way we're going to do business will continue to change. .com, that crisis was a crisis of eligibility. Everyone was eligible to buy stocks, whether it was suitable or not, and they did, and that yielded a fantastic rise in stock prices before a crash. The subprime crisis, the lending crisis, was a crisis of suitability. Everyone was eligible to get mortgage financing, but it wasn't always suitable. There were many, many people that should not have bought a house. They should have stayed renters, but because of that fear and because of the flow of money, they went in and did something, and that yielded this bubble. So we're in a position right now, which I like to think of as a convergence of sales and compliance. And historically, compliance in the financial services industry is really, it's like sales prevention, right? We think of things that anything that is a compliance-oriented thing means a prevention of sales. And at some level, it will, again, restrict your movement and what you can do, but it can also be a very, very positive thing for the industry as a whole, especially as there are fewer well-trained, qualified lenders in the marketplace today. As that happens, you're going to see your overall income and your overall profitability continue to rise. Now, suitability is what's right for the client. Eligibility is yes or no. Do they have the credit or the capacity or the income to borrow? That's eligibility. That's where our industry has always focused. What we're going to see now is a major shift away from eligibility. Eligibility is just table stakes. You have to have a certain income and a certain credit history and a certain amount of cash for down payment. The 4 C's, credit, collateral, capacity, and character, they have to be there. Your job is going to shift away from eligibility, which will become the job of the institution to manage, and your job will shift to a job of suitability. Suitability is, what is it that's right for this client? What's the best solution for them over time? How do I clearly communicate to that consumer and document what their need was and that I provided them the best overall solution? In the financial planning industry, when someone walks in with $100,000, there's not a lot of eligibility. You have money, you're eligible. Now, what is suitable for that client? What's the best use of that $100,000 to accomplish their goals over time? You'll be involved in both the borrowing decision and helping the client determine what to borrow, and I believe you'll also become part of the repaying decision, and the longer-term relationship will establish with that client, where it's not just a point-of-sale transaction to borrow, but helping them figure out how are they going to stay involved and how are they going to pay this thing off in the most efficient way over the next 10, 20, or 30 years. So this convergence around the lending transaction will have the institutions involved in providing training and content and tools and marketing, and the consumer is going to be looking for services and education and things that can help them, and you're going to see your role shifting from eligibility more to suitability. Now, we've got the CFPB, we've got many different groups that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. If you don't know what the CFPB is, then take some time to go to their site. It's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Groups like this are becoming incredibly well funded. They're now recruiting on college campuses to hire new young blood for auditors and whatnot. And I love this quote by George Bernard Shaw, that all professions are conspiracies against the layperson. And so in a way, the approach that the CFPB is taking to this whole challenge is, how do we do a better job as an industry policing people who have focused on selling products instead of really providing good financial advice to these consumers? And a lot of that energy right now is focused squarely on the lending industry. Now, compliance, as we start to shift away from what is compliance, again, compliance to me is a form of Veritas. Now, Veritas is something that's often defined as truth, but Harvard defines it in a really unique way. It's on their jerseys, their logos, and their slogans, but they say Veritas. The way they define it is Veritas is the star by which you steer to minimize the magnitude of our veering to one side or the other along our journey. You could call your journey life. You could call your journey right now the loan officer that is learning to become more than they ever thought that they would be in this industry. That's not about just pushing paper around. You'll maybe have very little involvement with the 1003 in the future. It'll all be done online, and Your team will process the paperwork. Your job will again be looking a lot more like other industries, say the financial advisor industry. So what is Veritas? If you think about loan officers, and if you're in a company with one loan officer or 1,000 loan officers, they all behave differently. And they have a degree to which they steer, right, the way they act and react over time. So you have a very, very wide range of behavior. So what is compliance? Compliance is really creating a series of rules. It's looking at how do we present as a company? How do we market as a company? How do we make sure that that one guy with an Excel spreadsheet that has 4 errors in the logic isn't someone that becomes part of a lawsuit or an investigation, and we as a company now put our entire well-being of all of our loan officers at risk? How many of you guys know other people in your company that present things maybe improperly, bad math or bad logic, or they're marketing and they're sending things out that don't have APR disclosures, don't have the appropriate company branding? So a compliance as a department or as something within your company is essentially creating some railroad tracks so the train can run very efficiently, but it can't go where it shouldn't. You still have a great deal of creativity in your behavior, but at the end of the day, that oversteer becomes less wide to the left, less wide to the right. As a company, you start to work together in a really clear and compelling way. So everyone can be more effective and more efficient because there's not going to be so much left and right. That's a big function of the way we see compliance unfolding in the financial planning industry and the lending industry. And all of this creates opportunity. There's tremendous opportunity that comes out of this process. Traditionally, when you think about the definition of opportunity, you know, your point of maximum financial risk is actually at the point where it's most exciting to be in the business. It's the point where things are literally thrilling and almost euphoric. You could say the refinance industry is getting close to that right now. The purchase industry is way over here on the other side. The point of maximum financial opportunity is the point when things are the worst. There's a lot of despondency, depression, hope starts to kind of reign supreme, and there's even relief. And in the housing industry, we update this each month in our market update that we do. We're starting to see relief and even optimism in the housing industry. But I always like to think about this in your overall business as an originator or as a manager of your company. A loan officer might find himself in one place, a branch manager another, a company CEO in another. But ask yourself, because if you're finding things right now are out of control, thrilling, and euphoric, you need to be thinking about the future, because that's when the business is at its greatest risk. If you find that you're really struggling right now, you may find in your own career cycle that this is the point of maximum financial opportunity as you move through this cycle and really start to develop your business and your craft in a whole new way. So one of the things I want you to think about is, are you a salesperson or an advisor? And what's the difference between a salesperson and an advisor? Both may ultimately sell product. You could say one may even sell more than another, but what's the difference for you? If I said, what a great salesperson, and I showed you this picture of a doctor, would you think of a doctor as a good salesperson? Would you want a doctor who was a great salesperson? When you were going into an operation, let's say, that was important to you, would you tell your friends, man, they use the end-to-rest fingertip scalpel and the new suture cut needle clips to close me up? Is that the type of experience that you want? One of the exercises that we often do is we ask a loan officer to think about their business. If your business was that of a profession such as a doctor, how would you run your practice differently? How would you approach your consultations with your clients? How would you act differently in your front office and your back office? In other words, how would you want to be perceived by that consumer? Does your consumer view you as a salesperson or an advisor? Said differently, are you selling products or are you solving problems? Because if you sell products for a living, then your fate is tied to the products that are made available to you by your lender, by the interest rates that are made available to you by the market. You're going to find that you get whipsawed up and down all the time. If you shift a belief that I'm an advisor in the problem-solving business, that's what I am, you will never, ever be unemployed because there are always problems. In 20 years that I've been in the lending business now, there have always been problems. They're different. They were different when my company was shifting from a 7% interest rate environment to a 9.5% environment. I talked to a large public company the other day that their average loan officer has been with them for 2 years. They do billions monthly in business, and their average loan officer's got 2 years experience because they're a telesales-focused market. I mean, think about that. These guys and gals have never seen interest rates above 5%. It's a different problem, right? But if you think about what you do as being in the problem-solving business, you will always be in business. So that's a shift in perspective. You know, if I'm sitting down with my doctor, I want him to ask me what's the problem, and I want to ultimately know they did the surgery and I feel better. I don't need to know exactly what was done. I just want to know that I feel better. What's the problem? I want to reduce my interest rate. Why do you want to reduce your interest rate? Well, because I'd like a lower payment. Great, I understand the lower payment. Me too. What would you do with that lower payment if you had it? Gosh, if I had a lower payment, I would probably save a little more, and I'd like to put away some money for college. Great, do you have a plan for saving that money for the college, for the future? Well, I don't. Well, let's look at seeing how much we can save you first. Maybe we can connect you with someone that can help you with that. You become a consultative advisor to that client. You help them resolve their problems. You help them to understand what their problems are. Most people don't know what their problems are. They focus on things like interest rate because we don't, as an industry, we've never really been trained to think about how do we help people understand what their problem really is, and then how do we help them feel better. In the financial planning industry, there's a model, and I've kind of put it here on the screen for you to think about, and I've said financial advisor and liability advisor. You know, at the beginning, if a company could acquire clients without you, would you be there today? If your company could get all the clients that you generate today without you, they probably would. So at the heart of what we all do is we have an ability to acquire clients that our company doesn't have, and that's why we're there. Now, in the financial planning business, the cycle of a financial advisor is once they have they've acquired, they document the needs of that client very specifically, they develop a plan for that client, and they present that plan to the client. And once that plan's been presented, if that client says no, they can go acquire new clients, or they could revise the plan in some way. If the client says yes, they would then move through the process of actually implementing that plan. This is the area that we are focusing on this call and in the industry right now to say the lending industry needs to mature dramatically to catch up with the financial and planning industry. We need to do a better job documenting the needs of the client because it's being required by the regulatory bodies. We need to do a better job of developing a plan for that client, and we need to do a better job of presenting that plan. If we do that, which we're being required to do that by the regulatory bodies, that the powers that be, but ironically, if we do what they're asking us to do, we'll actually have a happier customer, and we'll have more customers that say yes, which means we have higher origination and lock pull-throughs, we have better overall lending processes, and we have higher closing rates for the loans that we do. And if we do that, we'll have an opportunity to conduct reviews, which will start to have an impact on our ability to acquire more clients through referrals, because people refer people that provide good advice. They rarely refer people that sell products. If you go buy an insurance policy, it's unlikely that you're going to call your friend and say, I just bought this great insurance policy. You've got to go talk to Rick. but you provide good advice. This guy just helped me figure out how to pay my house off in 21 years without changing my payment. It was really cool. Man, he gave me some great advice. People want to know about that. They want to be referred. So we're going to go big picture here, and then we're going to drill down and give you some practical examples. If we look at all of the ages in time, the Stone Age, the Iron Age, the Agricultural Age, the Industrial Age, the Space Age, we're now in the Idea Age. One of the things that's happened consistently, and that is there have been these great shocks that have changed our industry dramatically. The Stone Age went to the Iron Age for a reason. The Agricultural Age went to the Industrial Age for a reason. But if you just take the Agricultural Age, 80% of our entire population was spent making food. That's what we did. We farmed. We produced food. In the Industrial Age, which was brought about by a change in technology, we now have less than 3% of our population producing 10 times the food that was produced in the Agricultural Age. So much, much fewer people producing a much greater level because of that productivity. So over time, these ages and these technology shocks and compliance shocks ultimately eliminate costly humans that were doing unproductive work, people that really weren't contributing. Each time there's an advancement, we saw a shock that changed the industry, the age in which we live. We're now in the Idea Age, and things are moving very quickly, and you will find that there are far fewer loan officers producing at much higher levels in time. And you're next. Unless you become a productive human, you are going to, an extremely productive human, you could be phased out as well. How do you become more productive? You become more efficient and more effective, but the litmus test is how effective are you. See, the entire manufacturing industry in the U.S. has been phased out because it became less and less effective, and other countries like China became more effective in terms of their production. We were more effective at finance, insurance, real estate, and through 2009, that number was continuing to go up and up. We became a bigger producer of finance, insurance, and real estate, the FIRE economy, back in 1985. We've never looked back. But now we're starting to see that number turn down a bit. So another question that I would ask you to think about in your practice today is, are you becoming more efficient or more effective? Because the ROI on efficiency is about 20%. When you become more efficient, you're doing things right. When you become more effective, you're doing the right things. And that has about an 80% ROI when you become more effective. Most of us focus our time on becoming more efficient, when what we need to really do is think about, how do I become more effective? If I'm more efficient, I might drive somewhere faster. If I'm more effective, I might make sure that I'm going to the right destination. Because if I'm driving faster and I'm going in the wrong direction, I may be efficient, but I'm not going to get the results that I want. So being effective to me right now is learning, how can I become more effective in how I engage my clients? And that has to align with sales, increasing my productivity, and it also has to align with the compliance changes and the shifts that are happening, so I can be more effective with where the industry is going to take me. Now we're going to share with you a tool that we've developed for that, but hopefully these concepts will resonate with you in terms of what is it that you're going to do, because a good tool makes your work easier. It makes it more efficient. It's certainly easier to take a shovel and dig than it is to use your hands, right? A great tool modifies your behavior to make work more productive. So it's not just more efficient, but the very work itself is more productive. You can buy shovels now that are ergonomically designed, and they have certain types of shapes at Home Depot, and they actually change the way you shovel, and you're much more effective as well as efficient. So when you think about something like this, now if I showed you this and I asked you to go draw this on a sheet of paper, and you took some time and you sat there with your paper and you started moving your pen around, you could probably get pretty close. But this is something that my daughter did when she was 4. And she could do that very easily, and she could do it time and time again. without mistake because she had a little tool called a spirograph. All she needed was the wheel and the pen, and with that tool, she could create some really intricate drawings, something that are almost impossible for someone to create by hand. What is the right tool? Whether it's our tool or another tool, there are tools that can make you very effective and very efficient, but more importantly, effective in how you communicate to your clients what it is that they need to consider. The particular tool that we started developing came out of a compliance need, but also it was for a large financial and services company called Ameriprise. They said, you know, we are financial planning firms. We're the largest financial planning firm by plans in the world. We do half of all financial plans in the U.S. We have no way to do a liability plan. So years ago, we took a technology we developed and we said, how would we create a liability planning tool that rivaled the best financial planning tools in the market so that loan officers could benefit from these changes and present in a compliant or more compliant way and simultaneously answer questions to help clients increase their conversion rates? How would we help them not only change the way they do business to be more efficient, but to actually be more effective at the same time? Because I wanted a tool that would actually change your behavior. As we developed that, we looked at all of the information that went into producing a lead, systems training. There's a lot of stuff that goes into generating a lead. We looked at loan officers who took that lead and went right into a 1003. They were missing what the financial planning industry has deemed so critical, that being that point of sale, what happens when that lead is there? How do you help them identify a problem that they have in a way that allows them to understand that you are the right person to solve that problem? And how do you also do it in an environment that's changing where fewer and fewer of our interactions are face-to-face and more of it's going to offline sharing such as email or online sharing? This meeting today is a product of online sharing. It'd be very difficult for me to communicate all of the stuff that I'm sharing with you if you were just hearing my voice. Online sharing means we're not together, but we can be meeting remotely. That's more effective than offline sharing. Your conversion rates traditionally are highest face-to-face, but online sharing is catching up. Some people prefer to meet with you via the web from their office without driving to your office, but offline sharing is the most difficult. From our focus groups, it is the #1 point of contact for the loan officer is email or an interest rate call that they're getting via email. It's an offline sharing experience. You need to learn, how do I move that client to online sharing and or face-to-face meetings as quickly as possible? And if you write a couple of things down from this meeting, I want you to think about, again, how you position your practice, how do you solve problems. But there are 3 questions that we found, and there were a lot of work that we did. It was millions of dollars that were spent with a company we were working with studying conversion rates, and they found that there were 3 critical questions that had to be answered for the client. The cash impact at closing, clearly compare the options on a side-by-side basis, the payment impact at closing, that being the cash flow. Can I afford this on a monthly basis, and what's the impact going to look like over time? And then the wealth impact. Which is better over time for me, over 3 years or 5 years? And that's a target time frame, and that's critical in financial planning, and other CFPB type industry groups are saying you have to show that you provided material benefit, and you had to show that benefit over a period of time that's targeted to that client's specific needs. So if you can clearly communicate these things to the client, you'll see dramatic increases in your conversion rates and your alignment with their needs overall. So when we started developing this tool for our Ameriprise project and putting something together for the mortgage industry and through the Mortgage Success Partnership, we really focused on those 3 areas with this tool. How do we document the needs of the client? How do we help you develop a plan for the client and present that plan in a way that's going to be compelling? So I'll take a quick minute or two. Let me kind of show you an example of how we would take some of this advice and this approach and use it to support your client. And then we want to have some time to open up for Q&A and stuff that you might have, because we've covered a lot of things that I want to get you thinking about as to how the industry is shifting. And in many ways, how do I think about my business more like, I'd say you're more like a doctor, more like a financial advisor, will get you more in alignment with how things are going to be shifting going forward. If I pull up the software, this is just an example here that I was putting together based on a recent case study. But we can do this in 5 minutes or less. Think about the spirograph. This was designed in a way that if you can simply follow along, 3-step process, manage, borrow, and present, you can both identify the needs of the client, you can create the plan, and then you can present that plan to the client in a clear, compelling way. So I was going to type one up, but I want to have some time for Q&A. So let's just say you've got a client who's looking to refinance. They could refinance, they could purchase, they could rent versus own, et cetera. But it's a refi of their house on Main Street. I'm going to collect their name, their income, their tax bracket. None of these are required, but these are a couple of fields that I want. I don't need a whole lot of information. I don't need address and phone number unless I want to just have that for contact purposes. I do need their current liabilities. I can have an unlimited number of liabilities, as Eric mentioned. I could show mortgage and auto and credit cards, and I could do a full plan comparing all their liabilities and showing a strategy for how they're going to pay that debt off and stuff if I want to do that. We're going to keep this real simple. This client, if I look at the details, they have a $250,000 home. They have a 7-year ARM that they're already in. They took it out in March of 2009 at 5.5%. They owe $189. They're paying $1135 a month. Because it's an ARM, I need to know what was their start rate. When's that ARM going to start adjusting? I can put that information in. What's it based on? I save that information. What this allows me to do is create my base. Where are you now? And I can set up their important objectives. And you want to document these. These are actually called statement of interest. These are the kinds of things that you need to have documented so that you met with a client, you understood their current situation, this is what they have, and what do they want to do? They want to understand if they should stay with their 7-year ARM and let it adjust, or go to a fixed if they plan to stay in the house for 10 years or more, and at which time they plan to buy something smaller. These are things I need to know through the questions I ask. What are you trying to accomplish? What's the most important thing for you to accomplish? If we were to work together, what do you want to do? And I like to ask I always ask those 3 questions. What about closing costs? What's important to you? Well, I'd like to have no out-of-pocket. Great. What about payment? What's important to you? Well, I'd like it to stay the same or go down. Great. What about wealth? What's most important? Well, I'd like to see which costs the least over time. And that time frame for them was 7 to 10 years. That's their time frame. So this is where I'm understanding their needs. This is where I'm being like that good listener, and I'm listening to what is important to you. And if I know that, I can come to the Borrow tab, and I can manage any possible scenario. I compare their current liabilities today to a 15-year or a 30-year or a new 7-year ARM, and it's simple to set up. I just need to set up some different scenarios that might make sense for them, and I need to answer in this format. When I say change your behavior, again, unless you've had millions of dollars to spend studying client psychology and things that they want, then we need to be able to learn. If you've got a better process, go for it. But this process is something we know can increase your conversion rates. If you can go through an answer for this client, you have no out-of-pocket expense here. We're going to have basically about $90 out of pocket. You can cover the closing costs. I've actually rolled those right into your loan amount. Great. Well, what about my payment? Well, you have different payment options. 7-year ARM today, you're paying $1136. You pay $1310 on the 15. That doesn't meet your criteria, so I'm going to go ahead and simply take that away. With one click, I take that away, and we simply go back to comparing the 30, which would save you $269, and the 7-year, which would save you $361. And notice all this math is done for you. All I have to do up here is set up a couple of options, and we're going to do all math below, including their wealth impact. If their time frame is 7 years, we know intuitively the 7 years should be better, but I can give it to them as one number. Over 7 years, you'll save $66,301 with the 7-year, $53,476 with the 30-year. So if your time frame is 7 years, the 7-year is better. If it's 10 years, you're going to save $129. Look, they're almost identical. So as long as you don't think you'll be there for more than 10 years, the 7-year is actually still a better option for you for the 30. And think about how quickly we can tell that story. Now remember, this is the second part. We want to understand the needs. We want to be able to do the analysis to create a plan, and then want to present that plan. And with the Present tab, I can go through and pick a cover introduction. I can preview different things and see what do I want to include in that presentation, and I can launch that presentation, and now I have something I can archive because it's archived for me automatically, and I can send it to my client and they can review it, or we can sit right there in their office and talk about it. Things that are very difficult to explain. If you don't do this, your arm's going to adjust right here in about 3 years. See how it's going to go up? You could go up to 25, 27. With a new arm I'm recommending, your payment's going to be fixed for 7 more years, and at 10 years your payment is still lower than what you're spending today on your current mortgage. So this makes a lot of sense for you, and there's additional information that's going to be available. You've got AM tables. You control what you display, but you're presenting much more like a financial advisor, and you're showing something that's going to, again, have the disclosures, the APRs, the calculations, and make you look like a rock star. If that client says, yes, I want to move forward, that's when you would then enter into the normal origination process or outsource that. Most of you that understand this and embrace it will be doing so many of these for your clients through your referrals that your team will be handling the paperwork. You'll simply be doing that critical Q&A around what's important to you and how do we present that information. So I would encourage you, as you sort of make this transition, profit from others' experience, whether it be Eric's or ours, the team at MSS and the tools we're developing, but you can become proficient at creating more and more complicated scenarios and taking advantage of more and more opportunities, but it doesn't mean it's that much harder. With the right tools, you can simply adjust that pen, adjust that wheel, and you can create some really, really beautiful presentations for your clients with very, very little effort. So I'm going to wrap up here, and that'll leave us about 10 minutes for any questions that you might have overall. Again, we've archived this so you can go through and take a look at it and take some notes and see what really stood out to you as ways you can enhance or embrace this change to build a better practice for the future.
All right. Well, Todd, as people are, typing in their questions, the first one that came across is there was a book you referenced at the very beginning of the session, right, where you were getting into some of the compliance and the are you product seller versus solving problems. Do you remember the title of the book that you were talking about?
Well, the book that I mentioned was on manias, panics, and crashes. It was actually about all of the major change that has come about from these different things. It wasn't so much about the topic of how to do a better job solving problems for the clients. The book was about just the dynamics of how we have these major shocks in our system and how they impact our industries going forward and the changes that happen. But not so much about the topic of how do you, how do you do a better job of that. We could talk about that if you want to, but there's no book that I know on that topic.
Okay. Well, one of the questions that just came in, and Todd, I want to rip through as many of these as we can. One of the ones that you mentioned came up during the piece about competition with online and rate shoppers, particularly who connect via email. The question came across from one of the attendees that most of the contacts start with emails from rate shoppers. How do you convert an email-based rate shopper to a phone conversation, or even, as you've mentioned in this program, the direct?
Yeah, so again, if companies can figure, one of the benefits or the ways of avoiding compliance is to eliminate all the uncertainty between the company and the consumer. So we're seeing a lot of companies are rebirthing themselves as online telecenters and stuff because they have more direct client contact, and they believe I could ultimately deliver a cheaper price. Most initial searches for real estate mortgage lending begins online through calculators and rate searches at Bankrate and stuff, and then eventually it moves offline to a question that can't be answered clearly. So think about it again, your job, the biggest value you can bring to the consumer is going to be your ability to provide advice to them. If you get an email that comes in saying, what's your interest rate today, the worst thing you can do is to respond with the interest rate. Because again, you're commoditizing the value that you offer. You need to have some good, solid questions that you can respond with, such as, that's a great question. Which products are you clear about, or have you determined are appropriate for you? I wouldn't want to give you the wrong or the lowest rate on the wrong product. There are a few questions that I'd like to ask you to determine which product is the right product, and then we can look at your rate. In other words, you need to engage them and move them from an offline share to either an online share or a face-to-face. Otherwise, you're going to get beat online with prices if you are commoditizing what you do. People will pay more for good advice because it's not a cost to them if you can show them how your advice is really going to be of value. Most people want someone to help them as long as they feel like overall they're going to be better off financially. And again, things like our tool, other things in terms of learning how you position yourself as an advisor are going to be critical in how you develop that sort of skill set going forward.
Awesome. Awesome. You know, it's often we hear the statement, you know, the best rate in the world on the wrong program is likely to cost you a lot more than the right program at a competitive price, and that's where you can make that shift in thinking. Some of those profound things that really catch people's attention, get them thinking, those kind of statements in the form of an email is where you can begin to create a true dialogue, which is what really this should always be about, is creating a true conversation that's of benefit to the consumer. All right, there's a lot of questions coming in here, and just to let everybody know as we're winding down on this webinar, those of you that are right at the top of the hour and have to jump off for another appointment, there's a couple of quick things that I wanted to share with you all just before you leave. You can hang with us in a couple extra minutes or make sure that you come back to the recording. I do want to hit a couple of additional questions here, but for those of you, you know, the final thought here is if you'd like more information about what Todd has shared with you today, there's some simple and easy ways to get that. We'll get that information out to you guys through email. As you've registered, we'll have your contact information. Secondly, is you know, whatever you've heard today that has made an impact on you, that has changed your thinking about how you should, you know, remodel your practice a little bit and adjust your strategy or approach. The best thing you can do is to take just a handful of minutes here before you jump on the next phone call and think about what you should do with this. What is the most profound thing you've heard in today's program, and when would you like to have that idea implemented in your daily practice? Set a specific course of action for yourself. Decide when you would like to have that action implemented and move forward with reaching out to the resources that can help you achieve that goal. There are a ton of questions in here, by the way. We're not going to have time for all of them. One of the other ones that hit, that kind of caught my attention is one that was asked. Let me scroll back just a little bit so I can see it as you guys are continuing to pop through questions. And let's see. The question basically reads, coming from a lead generation perspective, a lot of the clients get too hung up on trying to filter for the perfect loan, focused much too much on rate and product. Would you encourage lenders to broaden their filters and focus more on helping customers than getting the quote-unquote perfect loan? Todd, what's your advice in that perspective?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of like there's Prince Charming, there's Job Charming, there's Loan Charming. I mean, you know, is there a perfect loan out there that's going to solve all their problems? That's the reason we do the closing cost, payment, and wealth, because I ask clients which of these is the most important. Because you guys know if you want the lowest closing costs, I can finance that in, but that's going to affect your payment. If you want the lowest cost over time, then I could do an interest only, right? Possibly to reduce your cost over time. But if you're, what's important to them? And so there's a trade-off, and so there's no one perfect loan. That's why it's more important to kind of help people, you know, you get price, quality, or service. You've heard that old triangle. Pick one. I'll say, you know, closing cost, payment, or cost over time. Pick the one that's most important, and that will tell us a lot about which product we need to go by. But there is no one product that's going to solve all your problems. My job is to figure out what's really important, what's the most important thing for you to accomplish with this transaction, and if you can tell me what that is, don't you worry. We're going to go through and get you into the best product to solve that particular need. If you say it's got to be a blend of the three, then we can do that too, right? But if you can't have all three, you can't have the lowest closing cost, the lowest payment, and the lowest cost over time. Those three things are not going to all operate.
Right, they're just simply not compatible. But ultimately, you know, what I'm hearing you say, Todd, is that yes, it is better to be a problem solver versus a product seller. And if you think about that for all of the attendees on the webinar and those of you listening to this on recording, think about how you can transition your business, because at the end of the day, refinance business is going to dry up. Things will get tighter eventually, and you'll be looking at a more competitive landscape, and it's the people who evolve to that layer of being a liability advisor that are going to stand out clearly beyond the competition from a value perspective. All right, just as we're trying to wrap up here in the last couple of minutes of the webinar, there was a couple of things that I wanted to share with you. Mortgage Success Source has graciously offered some gifts, and then I wanted to offer you some additional information and resources from the family of Maximum Acceleration. First of all, for any of you that would like more information about how to get set up on the system that Todd has shared with you, there is also an offer for a free 21-day trial that you can check it out and get some upfront guidance. If you're an individual originator who's looking to purchase it for yourself, contact Scott Remete with contact information you're seeing on your screen. For corporate inquiries, if you're talking about acquiring the tool for your entire team, if you're in a management or leadership position, contact Mark Tetris, and of course you'll see the information below. It's SREMITE@MSSLLC.com is for the individual MLOs, and Mark Tetris at MTETRIS@MSSLLC.com for corporate group account contacts. All right, last thing, if you'd like more information about how coaching can help you get to the next level and you're curious about what Maximum Acceleration offers, the best way we found to help you understand the value of coaching is to let you experience it. So be welcome to join, ask for, or receive from us what we call our strategy session. You'll get an in-depth direct guidance on how you could implement some of the ideas and strategies from today's call in a one-on-one session with one of our coaches. There's no cost or obligation, just something that we have found to be the most efficient way to let you experience the value of coaching and then decide whether it's right for you or not. From there, like I said, the final pieces of putting, if you will, a neat bow on what you've heard from Todd today, and by the way, I want to thank you, Todd, as part of this conversation for sharing your ideas and value with everybody. I think that we've had a very idea-packed webinar. There's a lot of nuggets in here that I hope you all were able to catch and capture. I'd encourage you to catch the recording of this video. It'll be up on YouTube here in just a few minutes that you'll be able to get back to later. I'd encourage you to listen to it a couple of times again. Grab from it the nuggets, the ideas, the most valuable things you've heard in the program. Decide what you want to do with them and by when you want to have them up and running as part of your business. And then, if there's tools and resources you need to be able to make that happen for yourself, reach out to the people who have those resources available. Other than that, just wanted to quickly preview, remind you that this is part of a weekly webinar series that happens every day at the same, every week at the same time, Tuesdays at 11 o'clock Central, 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific, 10 Mountain. If you'd like information about future upcoming events and webinars, certainly go to our website, mxlcoach.com/webinars. All of these webinars will be free, and you're welcome to join us for future events. With that in mind, Todd, any final thoughts or advice or guidance that you'd like to share with people?
No, I think that was a great closing. With things like this where you're presented with a lot of ideas, it's best to take one that really, again, stood out to you, something that you can say, okay, that was an hour, but I really remember that one comment. Start with that and simply ask some questions. How would I take and incorporate this into my business? Because your business is changing, and it will continue to change for many years to come. But with that will come great opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, again, Todd, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being willing to, share these wonderful ideas with us. I know that people who actually take this advice and implement something will get great results with it. And I encourage all of you who attended to certainly take that initiative to improve your business and to move to the problem solver side of the balance sheet, if you will, here. With that in mind, Beverly, if you, we'll let you kind of take the final wrap here. And then, Todd, thank you again for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you both, Eric and Todd. This concludes today's webinar. I would like to thank all of the attendees and, of course, today's presenters, Todd Ballinger of Mortgage Success Source and Eric Janesco of Maximum Acceleration. If you have any questions post-webinar, you can email Todd or Eric, and I'm going to actually post those email addresses in the chat section of this webinar right now, and I'll leave it open for a few minutes before we end the webinar. And once again, thank you and have a great rest of the day.